Kings fans have their say about what's going on with the team and more on this fan feedback edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years, also co-host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the past 18 years, and a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code Locked On NHL for $20 off your first purchase. It is a Kings fan feedback Friday, your chance to sound off, critique, praise, complain, celebrate our LA Kings. And if you might be new to the show, we do this every Friday, off season, regular season, and playoffs. So let's get right into it. Our first email, and we've got a group of emails kind of together because it's all about the same subject. Comes from Ron in Santa Fe Springs, and he says, I just saw former Kings head coach Todd McLellan was hired as a new head coach in Detroit. Does this mean the Kings will not have to pay him the rest of his contract? And will this have any kind of positive impact on the team? Thanks, and go Kings go. Ben in Irvine says, with Todd McLellan being hired by the Red Wings, did Detroit have to get permission from the Kings to hire him? Could it have been possible that they could have been told no? Just curious, not sure how this works. So why not ask you? Love the show. Go Kings go. Again, that was Ben in Irvine. And Brian in Tampa checks in to kind of answer the questions. He says, with Todd McLellan being hired by Detroit, the Kings should free up around $3.22 million that was owed to him for the remainder of the season. He's not salary cap space, but still helps the overall budget. So yes, Brian is correct. And I'm going to trust Brian on the amount of money the Kings are saving. So I know Todd McLellan is making $5 million a year. So divide that by the number of games that, have been 82 games. You find out how many he gets paid per game. I guess then you would multiply that by the number of games the Kings have played this year. Anyway, I'm going to trust him that it is around 3.22 million or whatever the number is that he came up with. But yes, the salary cap only pertains to player contracts. Coaches' contracts play no part in the salary cap. So the Kings have no advantage as far as saving money from that aspect, but the organization, yes, now does not have to pay the remainder of Todd McLellan's contract. Yes, the Red Wings did have to get permission from the Kings to speak with McLellan because while he was relieved of his coaching duties, he was still a Kings employee because of his guaranteed contract. I guess he could have quit, walked away from that money, and then been a free agent. But obviously he wanted to still get paid while he wasn't working. But once he was offered this new job, either the Kings were going to have to give permission, or I guess he could have resigned or quit or said, I don't want the money anymore. Then he's free to do whatever he wants. But yes, again, the Kings had to give him permission because he was technically still an employee of the team. So they said, yes, you're free to talk with him. They talk with him. They work out a deal. They hire him. So now the Kings are no longer paying Todd McLellan. He is now under contract with the Detroit Red Wings. Is it possible the Kings could have told Detroit, no, you do not have permission to speak with him, and make him play out the remainder of his contract? Then after this season, he no longer would be an employee of the Kings, and then he could have done it whatever he wanted. It's possible. How often does that happen? I don't remember the last time it's happened. Obviously, the Kings would like to not have to pay a coach who's not coaching their team anymore. And Todd McLellan would like to work again. So it's usually the way it works. If two sides part on good terms, which it seems that the Kings and Todd McLellan did, that they would grant permission to let him work someplace else. And again, like I said, they don't want to pay him anymore to not coach. So the only situation I could think of, and nothing specific is coming to mind, but the only situation I could think of where a team would deny someone permission to talk to a coach they had just dismissed was if it was maybe a rival team and you kind of thought, this guy's a good coach, it's just not working out with us, but we don't want him to really join that team. So let's say no, and then they're probably going to hire someone before the end of the year. And that's the only situation I could think of where a team would not give another team permission to speak to a head coach. Otherwise, it almost always happens for the reasons that I stated. So the Kings already played the Red Wings in Los Angeles this year, so Todd McLellan will not be visiting LA this season unless something very unforeseen happens and they meet in the Stanley Cup final. But the Kings do visit Detroit in January 27th. So we'll see a Todd McLellan coached team against the LA Kings on January the 27th. Our next email comes from Kenny. He's in Pottsville, Pennsylvania, and he does the Silver and Black Layer podcast. It's a Kings and Raiders podcast. He says, "Hey, Eddie, hope you're doing well. Wanted to say that I like the show you did with Keith Freeze. One topic you brought up was what to do with Doughty when he returns. I think you keep Anderson and Gavrikov together. It's been too good to split up. I think Doughty would do great with Brandt Clark. Drew has been a pretty good offensive defenseman in the past, and I think those two together could really ramp up some scoring chances, and it wouldn't hurt Clark to be next to one of the greats as well. I also worry about some of the hits that Turcotte has been taking, and finally, with the injuries starting to pile up, do you think it's time to call up Arthur Kaliyev?" Again, that was from Kenny in Pottsville, Pennsylvania. Well, first off, I get what you're saying about not wanting to split up Gavrikov and Anderson, and maybe that's what Jim Hiller decides to do. I personally think that Doughty will return to the top pairing with Mikey Anderson. I don't think that will be much of a drop-off. And then you make the rest of the left side stronger. Gavrikov is on the second pairing, and Edmondson slides down to the third pairing. That makes it stronger all the way around. If you talked about pairing Doughty with Clark, well, then you would have two right shot defensemen on the same pairing. I would guess if you were going to do that, you'd move Clark over to the left side and keep Doughty on the right side. But I don't think with Brandt Clark still learning how to be an NHL level defenseman that they want to put him in that situation at this point. So I think, what is it? Is it Occam's razor? The most likely solution is usually the best solution or something like that. I should know that. I've referenced that before. I think the thing that makes the most sense is what the Kings will do. I think it'll be Mikey and Drew. I think Gavi will be with Clark, and I think Edmondson will be with Spence, and then it'll be probably Moverar or maybe Burrows as that extra defenseman if the Kings continue with the 11-7 setup. Brian in Los Alamitos checks in to say a belated Merry Christmas to you. Thank you, Brian. Really enjoyed your discussion with Keith Freeze on Tuesday. I thought his views on the Kings were pretty insightful, especially his thoughts on Rob Blake being promoted to president of hockey ops, Luke switching to president of business ops, and Nelson Emerson potentially taking over as GM. As much as I would like to see a new voice being brought in from the outside to be GM, I can totally see this move taking place. As for Trevor Moore, his season has been the most disappointing to me. Last season, I remember some Kings fans saying they should trade him because, one, his value will never be higher, and two, he'll never score 30 goals again. I thought those people were nuts, but maybe it was me. Thanks for putting out another great week of shows, especially over the holiday week. Go Kings, go. And again, that was Brian in Los Alamitos. Thank you, Brian. I agree with you. I thought that the Keith Freeze interview was a good one, and I thought his comment or his thoughts, particularly on what you mentioned, Kings management seeing Rob Blake staying with the organization but not in the GM role, having a promotion of sorts for a Kings legend, keeping him in the organization. And I don't think the Kings organization feels that Rob Blake has done as poor of a job as some of our fan base seems to believe. But I also think that they probably think if the Kings, again, lose in the first round of the playoffs, it doesn't make a lot of sense to keep that chain of command intact. It's something needs to change. Obviously, you've changed the head coach. You've brought in new players. It's the most logical thing. And his contract is up after this year. So if you do promote him to president of hockey ops, you're keeping him in the organization. You're rewarding him for all the work he's done as a player and in the front office. It's not obviously a demotion because he's in charge of the GM, but it also does, though, bring in someone else, another voice to kind of take over the more day-to-day operations as far as handling the roster and things like that. So I actually think that was a great call by Keith on that one. I could totally see that happening. As for Trevor Moore, I said it on our Thursday show, talking about players that had and had not met expectations this season. That, yeah, I think he's probably been the biggest disappointment so far to this point. But the whole thing about trading him, I mean, yeah, he had a career year, but it would make no sense to obviously trade him at that point. A 30 goal scorer who's making 4.2 million per year, that's a bargain. So hopefully Trevor can turn it around the rest of the season, and if not, get back on track for next year. But yeah, they're not gonna. I can understand why people might say that, but it has been a not a great year so far for Trevor. But hopefully he can get it going. And again, he's still not making a lot of money. And if he can get back to the 30 goal level he was a year ago, then that's a bargain of a contract. All right, we got plenty more emails to get to. We'll do that next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. It is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Just go to the PrizePick app, make your picks right now, and you could be a winner. And you can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. PrizePicks is the best way to get in on all the action in most states, including California. Download the PrizePick app today and use the code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. All right, we continue with the emails, and this one comes from Anne in Torrance. And she says, since we're about to move into a new year, what was your Kings highlight of 2024? Also, at this point in the season, do you see any Kings players in consideration for any individual awards? How about Jim Hiller for Coach of the Year? And that was Ann in Torrance. My highlight of 2024 for the LA Kings, and we're just talking obviously about this recent regular season, or the first few months of the regular season. I got to go with I think it's only this is the first or second game. I think it's the only game I've gone to as a fan this year. It was the night that the Dodgers won the World Series and the Kings beat up on the Vegas Golden Knights. It was such a fun atmosphere at crypto.com. And I was with my wife as a fan, and it was just a fun experience. Everybody was in such a good mood. We watched the Dodgers clinch the World Series in between the second and third period, and the Kings were already off to a nice lead. And then the Kings come on and close it out. That was just a fun night. Everybody was happy. Everybody was celebrating. It was a great night for two LA teams. And I would say that would be my personal highlight for the Kings in 2024. As far as any coach of the year or any kind of individual honors for any Kings players, I could see Jim Hiller getting some votes for coach of the year, maybe some like third or fourth place votes or something like that. I think it's like you vote for your top 5 or something like that. But I would be very, very surprised at this point, unless the Kings do something really outrageous, that he would be in consideration for coach of the year. Guys like Spencer Carberry in Washington, Sheldon Keefe in New Jersey, Craig Berube in Toronto, Scott Arniel in Winnipeg, probably your front runners. But honestly, if I was Jim Hiller, I wouldn't want to win that award because whoever wins the Jack Adams usually gets fired in a year or two. Jim Montgomery, Daryl Sutter, Bruce Cassidy, Gerard Gallant, these guys all were fired as head coaches shortly after winning the Coach of the Year award. So that's an award I don't want to have any part of. I think Anze Kopitar, to me, right now, would be the front runner to win the Lady Byng Award, which he's won before. It goes to the player that displays like gentlemanly play. Basically, who has the most points and the fewest penalties. Kopitar's got 37 points, and he has 0 penalty minutes on the season. I find it hard to believe that there's somebody else out there that's a plus 37 when you talk about those two categories. So we'll see if it happens for Anze Kopitar. But to me, I got to believe he would be the front runner for the Lady Byng. Other than that, I don't think any other Kings would be in consideration. Certainly the Kings are a great defensive team, but no real standout. Like Vladislav Gavrikov obviously is having a great year defensively, but he's not going to be up for the Norris Trophy. And my buddy Doug Stolhand, who does the Puck podcast with me, we've talked about this before. The Selke Trophy goes to the best defensive forward in hockey. Why is there not a trophy for the best defensive defenseman in hockey because right now it goes to guys like Cale Makar or Quinn Hughes or somebody like that. And they're very good defensemen, but it's more of an offensive award now than it was before. Maybe rename it. Have the Bobby Orr Award for the best offensive defenseman in the NHL, and then have the Norris Trophy be for the best defensive defenseman. Vladislav Gavrikov might have a shot winning the best defensive defenseman year of the year award, but that trophy doesn't exist. But I think it should. I really do. I think that's something the NHL should have. Our next email comes from John in San Diego. He says, I know you talked about some of the future players for the LA Kings this week. And for those of us not able to see goalie Carter George play in the World Juniors, can you tell us about what you saw with him? I hear a lot of great things. I'm very excited to see him in a Kings uniform in the not too distant future. Thanks for all you do every day, or go Kings go. That's John in San Diego. Well, I did watch the game, the World Juniors game for Canada against Finland, where Carter George, Kings' second-round draft pick in this year's draft, was in net. He looked fantastic. 31-save shutout in his World Junior debut is a pretty good start against a pretty good team, Finland. They're always in contention for a medal. 20 saves in the third period for Carter George. So he got better as the game went along. 4-0, Canada wins, and Carter George was named the player of the game. I've heard people talk about him looking like Jonathan Quick, and I have to say, I see what they're saying. Just the way he sets up in net, kind of his size, he looks similar to Jonathan Quick. But look, I'm no goalie, I'm no expert on the position, but from my vantage point, just watching him, I thought he was really controlled in the crease. Not a lot of movement from him. Kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Very conservative in his movements. Very quick, very precise, always under control. Finland had a partial breakaway in net in the second period, and he just calmly glided from his right to left and easily turned it aside. He just looks so calm and poised. I don't know if the scouting report for Finland was to shoot low on him, but he made a lot of pad saves, pretty good rebound control, really drops down and pops back up very, very quickly and easily. So I was impressed with what I saw from Carter George in that opening game of the World Juniors for him for Canada. And look, if you're the number one goalie for a Canadian junior team, obviously that speaks very highly of your talent, because there's some pretty good goaltending in Canada that, to say he's the number one guy, pretty impressive. So we'll keep track of how he does throughout the tournament, but I think there is some legitimate reason to be excited about Carter George in a Kings uniform in net in the not too distant future. This comes from Clark in Toronto. He says, I see Alexander Ovechkin is about to return from a fractured leg, but I haven't heard anything about Drew Doughty. Ovi was hurt during the season, and he's already coming back. Dewey was hurt before the season, and he's not even skating. Is his injury more serious than we have been told? Also, what's the latest on the rest of the injured players? To know more, Lewis. Thanks, and go Kings go. Clark in Toronto. Deno was back at practice today on Friday. He is expected to play on Saturday against the Oilers, so that's good. He missed just the one game against the Capitals. The Trevors are both skating on their own. Trevor Moore, Trevor Lewis were in red non-contact jerseys in practice, according to our friend Russell Morgan from Hockey Royalty. So it looks like they're both closer to returning sometime soon. As for Drew Doughty, I did see that Kings insider Zach Dooley said that his rehab is on schedule, but you are correct, Clark. He has not returned to skating yet, and the projection for him was return in January. So if he's not skating at the end of December, I would guess if he is going to come back in January, it would be late January. But no reports that he's had a setback or that things aren't going, as smoothly. I think with Ovechkin, he had a fractured fibula, the lower leg and the lower bones in the leg. So I think he's probably a little ahead of schedule, but Drew had the ankle fracture. So a little bit different than kind of the bone. I think that probably is a little bit more, when you're skating and using your edges, you put stress on your ankle. So I wouldn't read anything too much into that as far as comparing to Ovechkin. Yeah, they both had fractures, but one was a leg, one was an ankle. So maybe a little bit different there. But as far as we know, it looks like no concern with Drew Doughty. And maybe the Kings are being conservative because look how well Gavrikov and Anderson are playing. There's no real need to rush him back. That's for sure. All right, we got a few more emails. We'll also take a quick preview of the big game on Saturday between the Kings and the Oilers. We'll do that next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Hey, did Rocket Money help you find some subscriptions that you forgot about that you were paying twice for? It definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions I didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it easy to track them all down and get rid of them. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money also monitors your spending and helps you lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even your goal that you want to hit for this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all the app's premium features. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon, rocketmoney.com/lockedon. All right, we still have a couple more emails. This from Leslie in Pasadena. And she says, my husband and I will be at the Kings-Oilers game. I am both excited and concerned. Excited to see the Kings back on home ice in a big game, but concerned that this year will just be a repeat of the last few seasons. My husband said he thinks we're going to play the Oilers again. Do you agree? And again, that was Leslie in Pasadena. Well, the Kings have played 34 games, and we still have 48 games left in the regular season. But looking at it so far, I think it's hard not to say that Vegas and Edmonton are the two clear class teams in the Pacific Division. I think they're going to finish 1-2, and I think Vegas is going to win the division, and I think Edmonton is going to finish second, and I think the Kings are going to finish third. So it's looking like that, to be honest with you, barring something unforeseen, an injury to Leon Draisaitl or something like that. But it's looking like that's going to happen again. It does. I hate to say that, but it's the truth. And finally, Ed in Brea checks in with his usual positive email. He says, hope you had a good Christmas. Just bummed since we're playing the Edmonton Oilers that Saturday will be a guaranteed loss since Connor McDavid is our McDaddy, since they've defeated us 3 straight series and our uncle Leon as well. They officially own us. On a side note, I would start David Rittich against the Oilers since for some reason he's played well against them. Maybe since he's familiar with them when he was in Calgary. I'm not surprised that our GOAT rivals from Alberta jumped over us in the standings. And after this homestand, we go into 2025. Kings will be in the wild card mix and trying to hold on to a playoff spot. Scoring in the power play is still a problem for the Kings. On a side note, good to see Todd McLellan get another opportunity in Detroit since he had success there as an assistant. Happy New Year to all Kings fans. Go Kings, go. And that was Ed in Brea. I think I've mentioned this before. Do you think Ed is that like a defense mechanism? Because my wife sometimes does this when she's talking about the Chargers. We're going to a game. She's a big Chargers fan. She's like, oh, we're going to lose. We have no chance. And it's like, oh, and if you kind of prepare yourself for bad news, then it's not as bad when you get it. I don't know. But I mean, Ed's always guaranteeing losses, and Ed, you're not right all the time. An old wise sportscaster, Dick Stockton, once said, the past tells you what has happened, not what will happen. So keep that in mind. Just because the Oilers have had success against us doesn't mean they're going to have it again. But I get it. I do get it. I will say this, Ed. I'm not trying to make you look bad, but you brought this up, and it made me curious, so I did look. David Rittich is 5-5-1 in 13 career starts against Edmonton. Darcy Kemper is 10-3-4 in 17 starts. So Darcy Kemper has played obviously much better against Edmonton in his career than David Rittich has. So I'm expecting to see Kemper against the Oilers on Saturday and Rittich against the Flyers on Sunday, as the Kings are playing back-to-back games at home this weekend, but we shall see. Thank you to everyone who took the time to email. This show is literally not possible without your participation. And unlike Ed in Brea, I am choosing to be excited about the game on Saturday as the Kings take on the Oilers, battle of the second and third place teams in the Pacific Division, and yes, possible playoff preview once again. Kings are 19-10-5 on the season. Oilers are 21-11-2. But Edmonton has won 11 of 13. That's why they passed LA in the standings. Kings, though, are 10-2-1 at home this season. Oilers are 9-4-1 on the road. Kings will try and contain Connor McDavid and league MVP candidate Leon Draisaitl. He's second in the NHL in points, number one in goals with 24. Oilers are 10th in the NHL in goals per game, 3.26. Kings are third in the NHL in allowing goals per game, 2.56. So excited to see this matchup. Looking forward to it. I'll be out at the game. It's been a while since been out there at Crypto, so looking forward to that. Face-off between the Kings and Oilers is at 1 p.m. LA time, so make note of that early start time. Game will be televised locally on the FanDuel Sports Network. It's on ESPN Plus nationally, and you can hear it on the 710 ESPN app. For you everydayers, those you listen to watch Locked On LA Kings every day, coming up on Monday, we will recap 2 games on Monday, both games from over the weekend, Kings Oilers and Kings Flyers, which is on Sunday as well. If you want to get an email in at any point in time for the fan feedback show or for anything else, lockedoneddie@gmail.com. EDDIE is the email address. You can always leave your comments if you're watching on YouTube in the comments section, and we'd love you to stay interactive with the show on social media, X, Twitter, Instagram. We are at Locked On LA Kings. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thank you for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a great weekend. We will talk to you on Monday. And as always, go Kings, go.